The ancient Sumerian tablets describe the stories of the gods, their adventures, deeds, and battles, leading to the creation of the heavens, the earth, and humanity. Many of these stories are interpreted to be describing planets and the formation of the early solar system. And in many ways, the theories appear to add up. However, as the tablet stories continue on, they are read in a different way, as if these gods were not deities at all, but physical beings who came to the earth and were involved in human history. When we're looking into the stories and interpretations of the Sumerian tablets, there comes a point when we have to change our perspective as to the nature of who or what these gods were. For so long now, we've been observing the interpretations where these deities are essentially a storytelling method to explain the creation of our solar system in the form of planets. The electric universe and the Nibiru theory covers a few different possibilities about how these events could have transpired. However, as we look to the continuation of these stories, we begin to see the interpretations change. Looking at the Enuma Elish and a wide number of other Sumerian tablet stories, we see these gods interpreted as if they were actual physical beings who were believed to have played a part in the creation of humanity. This is one of the many reasons that interpreting the tablets are strange, and why historians may often choose to perceive the entire thing as a series of metaphors instead. In the main interpretation that came from Sitchin, he believed that these beings came from the planet Nibiru. However, other scholars who also interpret these gods as beings sometimes forego the conversation of Nibiru entirely and suggest instead that they simply came from somewhere else, such as the Pleiades, which are written about quite commonly in the tablets. Keep this in mind as we move forward, because while we'll be focusing on the general interpretations here, there are tons of variations and ideas about how this could have played out. Going back to the Enuma Elish, it ends with Enki or Ea creating humanity because Marduk commissioned it so. In other Sumerian stories, we find a similar description, except it is Enlil in the place of Marduk, because Marduk replaced Enlil in the Babylonian version. Enlil and Marduk are very similar though. They are both considered the supreme leaders of the Anunnaki. The only main difference is that Marduk is Enki's son and Enlil is Enki's half-brother. But herein we find perhaps one of the biggest criticisms of Sitchin's work. Sometimes Ea or Enki appears as a planet, and other times he seems to be a flesh and blood deity. It can be very confusing. Now, I suppose it doesn't really matter if we're looking at the entire story as an allegory, but observing it as actual historical events can definitely cause confusion in this regard. So for the sake of telling the story, we'll be using the name Ea to express the planet and Enki to describe the physical being. Just be aware that if you look these up online, you will find many places where their names overlap with each other in the mythologies. To that end, most of the deities you'll find have multiple names anyways. Enki is also known as Enkig, Nidamud, and Ninsaku throughout the various tellings. And as we previously described, he was the god of water, mischief, crafts, wisdom, and creation. Enlil, his brother on the other hand, was known as Elil and Nunamnir, and he was the Sumerian god of the air and was more powerful than any other elemental deity, eventually being worshipped as the king of the gods. He was also the son of Anu, and together, the three of them formed a triad which governed the heavens, earth, and underworld, or alternatively, the universe, sky and atmosphere, and the earth itself. After Anu, Enlil was the most powerful of the Mesopotamian gods, keeper of the Tablet of Destinies, which contained the fates of both gods and humans. But in that case, who was Anu? And what were the Anunnaki? That's a great question. But before we can answer it, we're going to have to look at another question first. So let's do the time warp again and return to that burning question from so long ago. Who are the Nephilim? As we discussed, the Bible speaks of these people or beings called the Nephilim. There's a lot of debate today as to who and what these beings were. Looking back to the original Hebrew translation, we see the word Nephilim directly translates to the fallen ones. Today, many believe this to mean that they were fallen angels, which seems to be what was depicted in the 2014 film, Noah. Sitchin, on the other hand, believed the translation was a bit different. He read fallen ones to mean those who came down, and that they didn't fall, but landed here in some kind of spaceship. To him, the Nephilim were the people of the fiery rockets. Of course, this is one of those translations that doesn't seem to often hold up well to scrutiny, but it's interesting given the context of these stories nonetheless. we should note that in his writings, Sitchin commonly used the name Nephilim in tandem with the Anunnaki, also written sometimes as Anuna. But personally, I'm not certain that this is the best use of these titles. You see, the Anunnaki are believed to have been the descendants of Anu, the Sky Father, and the two most prominent leaders of this group are Enki and Enlil. Beyond that, there's a lot of inconsistency between how many Anunnaki there were and what roles they fulfilled. For example, in the Enuma Elish, there's only a small handful of gods who are introduced. Tiamat, Enki, Marduk, you know the group, but then out of nowhere, Marduk places 600 gods on the earth and 300 in the heavens. And no explanation is ever given about who these gods were or where they came from. Later on in our own history, the ancient Hittites identified the Anunnaki as the oldest generation of gods who were overthrown and banished to the underworld by the younger gods, which is curiously what is described in the Enuma Elish itself and reflects the stories of the old Titan gods in Greece being overthrown by a younger pantheon. In the Bible, we see the following passage. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Well, they better have been courtly and romantic, because if that line is implying anything else, I don't like it. The Bible describes that they were the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men, essentially making the Nephilim be a little bit more like demigods, a hybridized species born of the gods who would have been the Anunnaki and humans together. It's theorized this could be where demigods in general came from, such as Hercules, who is the son of the god Zeus, and the mortal woman named Alcmene. The result of this made Hercules fully human, yet who had the gift of the tremendous strength of a god. Of course, depending on who you're speaking with, the concept of Nephilim could just come from a mistranslation of the Bible, and the Anunnaki being simply an ancient Mesopotamian archetype. For the sake of the story, I will be telling the tale from the perspective that the Anunnaki are physical beings. But as always, feel free to interpret this however you like, and please share your thoughts in the comments below as to what you believe these Anunnaki were.